Okay, so now we are up to part 2 in our pack frame series here, recreating the Trapper Nelson pack frame. And this frame I've completed now, it's done, other than the metal stay rod up the middle here. And this one's made of solid oak. And now I want to make another one. I'm making 3 of these that are exactly alike, so that I have one and 2 of my instructors have one that are exactly alike for the 3 packs that Jason's making. I've got another set of these oak staves that are already bent, and I'm going to make the next frame out of pine. And this is just a 1x3 furring strip of pine. And I'm just going to duplicate the first frame with the next one. And I thought we'd walk through that as I duplicated. I had planned on going ahead and doing the frame and putting it on video with the pack on it, but because I don't have the pack yet, and because I didn't put the rest of the completion of the frame on video, I thought I'd go ahead and make a second frame on video for you before I get the pack in hand to put on a frame. So, and then we'll talk a little bit about this as well, because these frames are very versatile in how you can utilize them. You don't have to necessarily attach straps to this thing or have any type of permanent attachment clips for your pack straps. You could use this very much like a Roycroft frame, where you just put a lark's head of material, of strapping material, over the top of this here and bring it around the bottom stays very much like you would on a Roycroft frame. We'll talk about that too in a little bit, but first let's get this frame done. Now, I've kind of been relegated to the old picnic table out here for this project, because I have a lot of work in process right now from Pathfinder Forge and Tool that has to go to the Self-Reliance Outfitter store in the shop in here. So I'm going to go ahead and work outside on this older picnic table today. It works just fine. It's a little beat up and ugly, but that really doesn't matter. It still works. So I'm going to get these cut off, and then we'll talk about putting the stays in just a minute. I got this tenon saw from a fellow named Bob Page, and I'll put his information at the bottom of this video, but he refurbishes old tools. And this is an old Adkins tenon saw made in Indianapolis, Indiana, probably in the late early 1900s. And this came from the Milwaukee public school system. When they sold off their woodworking tools for shop and things like that, someone picked this up, and somewhere along the line Bob got a hold of it, and he redid a couple saws for me recently, and this is one of them. And this is one of my absolute favorite saws for doing small tasks like this in softer, dry woods, because it really cuts well. It's easy to control, does a great job, and I'm going to use it a lot today in this project. Now, I used the original frame that I had to make this frame, so I'm just going to pattern the next frame off of it, and I'm just marking the areas on here where my lap joints are going to go, and then I'll cut those lap joints in with that same saw and then match them to the other side. You want to cut these lap joints on the inside of your lines, obviously, so that it's a tight fit. So just mark them individually. Okay, so here are my oak staves that go in here. And I'm just verifying real quick that those match up to my lines, which they do. And then I'm going to take my marking gauge and I'm going to match that up to this thickness, just like this, and tighten it down. Just like that. And that's going to tell me how deep I want to make the cuts on this piece here by just rolling this along this piece of wood, and it will leave a mark on the wood on both sides. And that'll be a depth stop indicator for me with my saw. Now I can clamp this down and cut to these lines with my saw. Now we're going to come in here with a chisel and a mallet and start to remove that material. Down to that stop line. So right there is the fit up I'm looking for. I'm going to mark that with a 1. I'm going to mark this with a 1 so that I know that fits that perfectly. And then I'm going to come in here to my next one, start to get it out of there. Okay, so at this point we've got this pack frame laid out. What we're going to do is we're going to come in here. I've got a set of these Irwin clamps, and I bought all 6 of these clamps were in a pack together, and they weren't really that expensive. So now we're just going to walk through here, and I'm going to put some Tite Bond glue in this joint. Spread it around in there with my fingers real good, just like that. Get my piece seated where I want it. Come in here with a good strong clamp, clamp it down. Just like that. Alright, so once we get that dry, we'll come back in and we'll pre-drill here and we'll screw it together, and then we can put our eye bolts in, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do here. Now, the thing about a project like this is it doesn't have to be real expensive. The lumber wasn't very expensive. You could cut down pallet wood if you had a table saw and make it very, very simple. I manufactured this mallet, but it could have been just a limb or something that was cut off like a baton, would work fine. You know, the square is a Johnson level square, and it came from Menards. The marking gauge came from Menards. The 2 more expensive tools, obviously this tenon saw, you want to buy a good quality saw. I bought this one refurbished and used. And then I've got a set of file Swiss made chisels, which are fairly expensive. But it really doesn't have to be real expensive to do modern woodworking with traditional tools. You just have to be selective in what you buy and make sure that the important things like cutting tools, just like your survival kit, just like your self-reliance equipment, cutting tools should always be the best that you can possibly afford because they're going to be your bread and butter. So I've got Swiss made chisels. I have a good US made refurbished saw. This other stuff, not so important as long as it's accurate. And Johnson Level's been making this kind of stuff for a long, long time, so I know it's going to be accurate. All right, so the next step in the process, once we've let this set up a little bit, is to get screws put in here. And we're going to just use a hand drill for that. And I've got a hand drill here that's got several bits in the back end of it. So we'll find a bit that's smaller than the screws that we're going to use. And we'll get that chucked up in here. And you can find these drills fairly commonly at flea markets and places like that. Finding one that's in real good condition sometimes is a challenge, but it's not overly difficult. Now, what I like to do is I like to come in with this thing. On the first one that I made, I just put them diagonal from each other and the opposite way on the other side. So it was pretty simple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this thing lined up to where I can get it good and square. I'll take this side off as well for the time being, so I can lay this thing flat on the table to drill it. And then I'm just going to come in here and drill my hole. Just like that. I have to clamp that thing down a little bit to get that drill bit out of there. There we go. Now, one thing you want to remember when you're doing this is if you're using a traditional wood screw like this, it's got a shoulder on that screw and it's meant to sit flush. If you don't have any kind of a countersink or you don't have a large enough bit for your hand drill that you're using, you can always take your marking knife and use it to bevel that hole, just like this, to put that recess in there for that screw. So it will sit down in there flush. Okay, so now I've just laid my oak frame on top of my pine and oak frame, and I'm just going through here and marking my spots where my eyelets go through there at, so that these frames will be the same and fit packs the same way. And once I've got it marked, I'll just go through here again and I'll pre-drill those holes, and then I'll get my eyes screwed in there. Alright, so the next part that has to be recreated are the wire stays. And I'm still not sure whether I'm going to put that piece of wire here or not. I probably will, but for now, I've got this heavy wire here, a heavy roll of wire. I use it for quite a bit of stuff. Not even sure what it is, maybe some kind of fence wire. So I'm going to cut it the right length for these. Just cut it off and then I'm going to bend it over here on an anvil. I can cold bend this stuff pretty easy. And we'll have our stay, once we get that straightened out, get it bent, we'll have one side of our stay and then we got to get the other side done. Then we'll figure out this middle part here. Alright, so I just cold bent these over my anvil. And these are the stays that hold the pack on. Just clip over the top of these. And I don't think they have to be real tight as far as the clipping goes here. They just have to fit over it, and I can squeeze them together a little bit if I want to. I'll get those straight. Make sure they're hanging about the same length on the pack. You definitely don't want them hanging below the frame. And then I'm going to work on this piece here. Alright, so we've got the wire stays taken care of now. Just cold bent on our anvil, and I put that wire in here. I just center drill each one of these cross ties here and then bend it over here and here to give me that structure. And I think that the main reason for this probably is because your straps are connected to this. If you had weight hanging off this, most of the weight would be being pulled from this particular location. So by tying it into the bottom, when you kind of spread that weight out over the length of the frame. So I went ahead and put that on there. Now I've just got to finish up the second frame and I'll have two done.